On example two, let's review what was going on in example one. Now, one of the things I touched on was it could have possibly been a picture tied to U.S. history, but it also could have been something having to do with air raids in World War II. Lo and behold, we were both moderately correct. Apparently, this picture has been used for World War II, or not World War II symbolism. Nuclear fallout symbolism and imagery for that part of U.S. history, but it actually is a picture from World War II of kids prepping in a school in case there was some sort of air raid in their schoolhouse. So we were both kind of right. Interesting. We were right in the sense that we were able to identify a possibility for the picture outside of U.S. history, but we were also able to identify a context of the picture within U.S. history. So that's pretty cool. So we did that one, and we knew it was before the 1960s. We got everything else right. We did pretty well. Just the thing was, it wasn't for U.S. history, but it has been used to set a tone in presenting information for U.S. history. Pretty cool. Now, here's the next image we're going to look at. We want to establish a time, establish a location, examine the people, examine any and all text, and come up with a possible choice in U.S. history. Unlike the one before, this is 100% U.S. history related. Let's figure out what's going on here. Let's start with the text. Do we see any text in this? Yeah, I see some text. I see canned water. Canned water. All right, we got canned food. Cool. Canned water, canned food. Why would we need those? We would need those for supplies, right? So we're thinking of a supply situation. And those are crates, right? Crates of supplies. So we have a ton of supplies. Let's take a look at the people. We got, looks like a daughter, a mother, and a dad. So we've got a three-person family. Three-person family. Let's look at what they're wearing. They're wearing skirts on the women. Dad's wearing a tie. Looks like older clothing. Definitely older clothing. Nothing that I would wear. Nothing my friends would wear. Maybe something my mom might have wore when she was a child, so that's possible. So that might put this somewhere in the 50s. Let's look at the location. What's going on here? Do you see windows? No, but what do you see? You see some bunk beds. Look at the bunk beds. We got a bunk bed there, a bunk bed there. We got a bunk bed right there. We got some benches right there as well. We've got a supply cabinet. So we got bunk beds. We got supply cabinets. Misspelled supply. Go figure. Recording a video. Typo. Supply cabs. Do you see any windows? No windows. Interesting. No windows. This room is also cylinder, right? So that's kind of interesting. A cylinder, no windows. It looks like there's some sort of crank here attached to something to raise and lower another thing. Maybe to raise and lower those bunk beds. Maybe to raise and lower a door. Who knows? It's just out of the realms of the picture. And now we got to establish a time. So it's black and white, so it's before the 60s for the most part. Now, some people will argue, well, I can just take a black and white filter and run it through a new picture. Yeah, you could, but you would still probably be able to tell by utilizing location, people, and any and all text that somebody just ran a filter through it. Pretty tricky, right? Some people might try to do that to you. Anyway, back to what I'm saying. Black and white picture before the 60s. The clothing that the people are wearing, probably 50s to 60s. 50s to 60s if you know anything about clothing. It's definitely not the 70s. I don't see bell bottoms. It's not the 80s. I don't see lime green shirts. This would be a colored picture. It's not the 90s. No one's got Vanilla Ice's haircut. So we're putting it right around the 50s or the 60s. So what do we got going on here? We got something in the 50s and 60s. We got bunk beds, supply cabinets, and a no windows thing. So what else do we know doesn't really have windows or may have a very small window? Basements tend to have zero windows or maybe even just a very small ventilation window. So it's possible this might be underground, right? Because if there were windows, the possibility of them opening up, right, and dirt coming in, I mean, it could be underground. Don't think about that. Don't think too hard. A bad joke. We've got a three-person family, so we know that the whole family is there. It's not just like a hangout for any one of them. The family is there. They're huddled close together. Take a look at this. They're huddled close together. They're looking at something, maybe talking. Dad's got the tie. Mom and daughter got the skirts on, the dresses. The text, we got supplies and everything. What we have here is a survival situation in the 50s. That's what we're chalking it up to. So let's chalk it up. We got a survival situation sometime in the 50s or the 60s. So situation in the 50s or 60s. So where are they? I'm thinking if you know anything about survival situations in the 50s and the 60s, you know about Cold War. You know about the possibility that there's some sort of nuclear war that's probably going to happen between the United States and the USSR. You may even know that people built bunkers. Bunkers were huge. Having a bunker for during the period of the Cold War, that period especially with the fear of nuclear war. So these people might be hanging out in their bunker, right? This is a very possible thing. This looks like a bunker to me. I've looked over quite a few bunkers. So this definitely looks like a bunker situation in the 50s or 60s. So possible choices in history. Let's look at this. I'm going to put this in 50s history. Possibly early 60s, maybe, but doubtful. We'll just leave it at 50s history. We got a bunker situation, and that's tied to the Cold War. So we have a survivalist situation as well. So we'll just leave that. We got that over there somewhere else. So we got 50s history, bunker situation, Cold War. So if we're asked anything on the EOC, we look at this picture, it's obviously tied to the 50s. It's tied to the Cold War. It's tied to a bunker situation. It's tied to this idea that nuclear war could break out at any time, so you had to be prepared. You had to have a bunker, and you had to have supplies and ration supplies, food, water, essential items in this bunker, because you were going to be there until the fallout cleared and it was safe to come out. These bunkers provided safety from the idea that if a nuclear or tactical nuclear strike happened, you would be safe in your bunker. So that was the idea, and that was a big thing in the 50s. Big thing in the 50s that you definitely want to research. So that's the conclusion we come out with. We're going to check it in the next video, at the beginning of the next video, just like we did. But we're going with bunker situation, 1950s, Cold War. If we see anything on the EOC, we know that this picture's tied to those 50 situations where people went to the bunkers to survive any sort of a nuclear attack or strike or war during the Cold War. So that's very important. So let's keep that in our mind. Let's go ahead to the next example where I'll reveal what's going on in this picture, and we'll take a look at another one.